President Joe Biden tonight defended the disastrous election campaign of Kamala Harris, insisting it had been inspiring and that she should be proud of her work. Addressing the American nation from the White House Rose Garden, the outgoing president said he'd congratulated his successor, Donald Trump. He promised a peaceful transition of power and urged Democrats to keep the faith. But there was no word on what had gone wrong, or indeed whether he accepted any blame for his party's miserable defeat. From Washington, here's our correspondent, Robert Moore.
Emerging from the Oval Office with his aviator glasses on, it looked like the Joe Biden of old. But everything in this town has changed, and the imminent return of Donald Trump is a devastating political blow for the president.
Good morning. Good morning, good morning.
Pointedly, given the chaos of the last transition, he stressed this time it would be a collaborative process.
Yesterday, I spoke with President-elect Trump to congratulate him on his victory. And I assured him that I would direct my entire administration to work with his team to ensure a peaceful and orderly transition.
Amid growing recriminations over who is to blame for the election defeat, in public, Biden praised his vice president.
She ran an inspiring campaign, and everyone got to see something that I learned early on to respect so much, her character. She has a backbone like a ramrod. She has great character, true character. She gave her whole heart and effort, and she and her entire team should be proud of the campaign they ran.
Kamala Harris left the national stage yesterday after her concession speech, finding time to thank her supporters and staff. And with her husband at her side, they walked off to her signature campaign song. But she left behind Democrats in a state of deep shock. Activists unable to even comprehend how they could lose to a twice impeached, convicted felon.
The 46th president of the United States, Joe Biden.
Many around Harris are blaming Biden for the hubris of standing for a second term, which had led to that great implosion at the debate.
The total initiative relative to what we're going to do with more Border Patrol and more asylum officers.
President Trump?
I really don't know what he said at the end of that sentence. I don't think he knows what he said either.
Setbacks are unavoidable, but giving up is unforgivable.
Back in the Rose Garden today, a chastened president encouraged liberal Americans not to despair.
A defeat does not mean we are defeated. We lost this battle. The America of your dreams is calling for you to get back up. That's the story of America for over 240 years.
But the questions are only mounting ahead of Donald Trump's return.
What went wrong, Mr. President? What went wrong, Mr. President?
Now the man who saw his presidency as the defense of democracy and as saving America from Trump must hand over the keys to the White House to his nemesis.
Is Donald Trump still a threat to democracy, sir?
Robert Moore, ITV News, Washington.
Well, we will get the latest from Robert Moore in Washington in just a moment. But first, let's go to our US correspondent, Dan Rivers, who's at Donald Trump's Mar-a-Lago estate in Florida. So, Dan, we're presuming he's there at home behind you. What's next for the president-elect?
Well, we understand that the president-elect is at Mar-a-Lago behind me. He has been meeting with his transition team both yesterday and today. Apparently he's superstitious and didn't want to even start talking about this until he knew he had been victorious in the election. A lot of names being kicked around, a lot of CVs being sent in to him as we speak. But some of the more interesting names in terms of internationally will clearly be who he decides is going to be his Secretary of State. One possibility is Rick Grinnell, who's a former ambassador to Germany under the previous first Trump administration, a real controversialist, a pretty kind of outspoken character. So that's one name in the mix. That would have to get through approval in Congress as well. Obviously, he'll also need to pick his chief of staff. That may, in fact, be the first job he decides to pick. Last time round in 2016, it took him 4 days to pick his chief of staff. That could come any day now, and we understand the job has been offered to Susie Wiles. It's hers to turn down, his key director of this election campaign.
OK, Dan Rivers in Mar-a-Lago, Florida, thank you. And let's turn to Robert Moore, who's in Washington, D.C. for us. Robert, you were there, you heard President Biden's speech. What did you make of what he said?
Well, look, Joe Biden, like Kamala Harris yesterday, are putting a brave face on a cataclysmic election defeat. They're making clear, though, that, they will facilitate this transition. And that is something that, of course, Trump did not do for Joe Biden 4 years ago. There's already talk about Donald Trump actually coming here to Washington next week to have some early meetings with Joe Biden and the White House transition team. The Democratic Party, in the meantime, is involved in a kind of gloomy and bloody inquest, frankly, after those stunning losses. It's not just that they lost the White House, obviously. It looks like they're also going to lose the House of Representatives, and Republicans will also have control of the Senate as well. And in addition to that, look, the Republicans and Donald Trump did incredibly well in some deep blue, heavily Democratic states like New Jersey and New York. So there's lots of hypotheticals kind of ricocheting around. What if Joe Biden hadn't stood in that second term? What happens if they'd actually managed to choose a candidate with more working class appeal? What there is here is a recognition that Washington and the United States are about to head in a very different and far less predictable direction.